Well, hi there folks, and welcome to part 2 of my getting back to balsa video, which, if you saw part 1, was about me getting back into building balsa, proper balsa wood RC kit, that is, after 10 or 15 years of building foam board and little glider conversions. Now the model I chose to build is quite a small one. It's from Black Hawk Models. I think it's called a mini stick amongst other things, and should be relatively simple, he said. And if you saw part 1, you'll see that I did manage, after a bit of a struggle, to put the fuselage together without too many mistakes, and made a pretty good job of the main spar, even if I say so myself. So next step obviously was covering, and again, it's a long time since I've done that, so that was going to be not the easiest of tasks. So anyway, let's get on with it, and I'll show you how I got on with covering this little model. And it's been an interesting journey. Right, well, first off, I was lucky enough to have some covering fabric left over from when I did my Pinto balsa build 12 years ago. There was just about enough there, I hoped. Wasn't really sure even how to use it, but had a quick look online. Started with a small piece, the vertical stab. Managed to iron it on okay, but then it wouldn't shrink. You're supposed to have a special little hot blower gun, which I haven't got, of course. Someone suggested online you could use a hairdryer. Well, I used my fan heater on 2 kilowatts. Too hot. It was hot enough to burn my hands, but still didn't actually shrink it. So then I resorted to ancient Black & Decker hot air gun, which will take paint off because it's very hot. And using it carefully, it has actually shrunk the fabric. I'm just going to touch that up again with an iron, see if I can take out those little wrinkles. And once I'm happy and have managed to do these okay, I might even tackle the main spar. Videos I saw online said you need a special little iron to put this shrink stuff on. Well, this is the iron I've got, and that's the iron I'm using. Well, practice makes perfect. I'm getting better at it. Still got a few crinkles in it though. Have to be very careful with my very hot air gun. Well, I'm getting on with the worst bit, which, well, I'm sure it's the worst bit anyway, which is covering it. Already made a couple of little boo-boos, and it doesn't look great. A few little stretch marks on it, but presumably you get better at doing this if you've done it for a few years. Made a boo-boo there because despite being really careful about where I put the control horns on these, I actually mounted that one on the wrong side, which meant that both of the wires, which come out should be out both sides, would have had to be on one side, but I managed to kind of butcher it off and put it on the other side. The other boo-boo I made was, I've glued this in because I was desperate to get it in, and in fact it would have been much easier to try and iron on covering on that before putting it in. But the instructions don't tell you at all really, they leave it to your imagination. Anyway, so I'm now going to have a go at the worst bit. Well, I reckon it will be anyway. That is covering the main spar, but I'm going to give it a go. Working a bit better now that I've got my domestic iron, which I'm using to iron it, at about the right temperature, because a lot of it comes down to just temperatures and how fast you move and so on. But I'm kind of improving, which is why I've left this pretty much till last. My techniques are improving as I've gone along. For example, taping it and trying to stretch it in pretty much the right place before you start. And when you are doing the ironing, if it's a long piece like this, start from the middle and work outwards, and that also avoids getting creases, I think. But it remains to be seen how it hot shrinks once I put my very over the top hot air gun on it. It should be much gentler than this, so I've had to be very careful the way I use this. Oh well, that hot air gun, way too much, and that's what happens if you overdo it a bit. I don't know whether it's salvageable. I think what I'll have to do is try and cut and splice. The reason I'm doing the underside first, as you can imagine, actually it shrinks so much. I should have done a wraparound on that one so that it had an overlap, because as I can see now, if you're heating it, once the adhesive on this gets soft, it just pulls it away. So I've definitely made a mistake with that one on the top, because all I did was take it to the edge. Actually, starting all over again with it, because I realised, looking at it a second time, I'd intended obviously to do the top surface of the main spar all in one piece, and stupidly I'd only done it in half again, so I might as well do the whole thing again This time cut this bigger so that I can put an overlap round here so that it's very secure, and use less heat when I'm applying some shrink heat to it. It's actually quite satisfying ripping this off, I must say. Right, so this is take 2, the underside, which even before risking putting a heat gun on it is pretty tight and nice. There's going to be an overlap there, but the most important, I think, is I've put an overlap, and then when I put the top surface on with an overlap from there down to there and an overlap from there round to here, I'm getting better at getting a nice even tension on those initial tacks that you have to put across to actually fix it in place. That's the important thing, I think. So I am getting better at this. Still not sure about my rather powerful heat gun though. Not sure if I'm going to risk it again. Right, well, I must say, I don't think I can let you can't really see, but it's actually pretty good. Needed a very long distance gentle touch to actually get this to shrink. A couple of bits aren't shrunk very well, but I put that down to a design fault with this, because at the end here, when you try and shrink the stuff on the top, of course the warmth, just probably because it's not very localized, pulls this off here. So there are a couple of little crinkles in the corners, and likewise this end, but it's actually got nice tension, and the underside is also pretty good. In fact, the underside's better than the top side. But all in all, I mean, there are still a few crinkles, but I've decided to quit while I'm ahead, because if I just go too far, I'm going to wreck what is actually 90% pretty good job. So, well chuffed with that. Next job, of course, is to cover the fuselage. And another little admission here with regard to my suggestion of a design fault. In fact, if I'd looked more carefully at the photograph, I'd have noticed that the film is intended to be wrapped around the end of those little pieces that are glued on the end of the spar. Though in my defence, you'd have to look pretty carefully at the illustration to actually notice it. Maybe they could have highlighted it, but perhaps they're assuming that you'd have some knowledge about the way these wing ends are supposed to be finished, although I'd imagine it's pretty doubtful on a kit this small and cheap. I have since found a good video, I'll link it below, on YouTube, where someone's showing you how to cover with tissue, but it's much the same techniques, I must say, as far as overlaps and the way you lay it out. But anyway, as I've said numerous times, it has been quite a learning experience, and I'd do better next time. Anyway, moving on, despite my stupid mistakes, I've just about got enough left to do the fuselage, but I think it's looking pretty good. Motor is on order, and I've prepped that to take my 2-gram servos that I had kicking around. These, because it was too small for 3.7-gram servos, but too big for 2-gram servos. So that's ready to go in, and I must say it's a long slow job compared to the foamies, and has been very frustrating, but I'm kind of had another go at trying a balsa model, and maybe if I'm stupid enough to try another one, I'd do a better job. One of the stupid mistakes I made was carefully cut the right size, but of course you have to peel off a backing, and what I did a couple of times was laid this very carefully on the model, started ironing away thinking that's not going, why isn't that working? Well, of course, all it does is iron this to the covering, which basically ruined a couple more bits. Well folks, I'm learning as I go along, and it's actually beginning to look almost like a fairly reasonable, tidy job. I'm almost impressed with myself. But there's just one last thing to do here, and that is to cover the size of the fuselage, obviously, and I've got to install the servos to operate the elevator rudder and so on. But as far as covering goes, believe it or not, after wasting so much in my efforts to cover this, this is all I've got left, and I think, if I'm lucky, I've just about got enough, if you look at this, to cover the side of the fuselage there. It's going to be touch and go, there's not much there, look. Right, well, I've just marked out the profile which is there, so I'm going to cut that out, and I think if I'm lucky, reversing it that way, I'm just going to get the other strip out of that side. Wish me luck. Yeah, what do you know? That's one side, and that's the other side, and there's just enough to do both sides. Well, who's a lucky boy? So there's one side ready to be hot ironed on, and like I say, I'm pretty sure there'll be enough. Look at that, even just perfect for there. I'm pretty sure there'd be enough to do the other side. I just can't believe my luck in doing that. Right, so like I figured before, the best way to approach this so you don't get wrinkles is to start in the middle and work outwards one way towards the nose. Well, actually, I've just realised this is the first time I've actually shown you me ironing on the colour film. As you can see, secured it there with a bit of tape to keep the tension on. Take it down a bit further, and then using my very small specially designed iron for putting on colour film, gently stroke it across as far as I can go, and then the final bit which will go round the end, and likewise that bit there goes round the end. And just give it a little clean up, smooth the edges. So I'm going to lift that a bit to get it nice and level. Very important you get it laying level, otherwise you've got no chance. Not sure about that bit, that might work. Well, I'm not expecting perfection because I checked online, and the last time I did this kind of stuff was 2012, so that's 12 years ago. It's not quite cut right. I'm going to give it a little stretch so that when I hot iron that on, it goes the right way. Like that. Almost getting there. I'm going to give it a very quick blast with hot air gun, very carefully, which will shrink it into those gaps, I'm hoping. And then look at that, even this little bit here, not quite perfect. You can see there's a little tiny gap there, but I'm not going to worry about that. I think once I give it a blast with my hot air gun very carefully to shrink that, I think that's going to be okay. Now I'm going to just see if there's enough to do the other side. And dare I say, it is 02:06 in the morning and I've just drunk a bottle of wine. So considering all that, I think I'm doing pretty well. Right, let's see. I'm now going to see if I can cut a piece out of that last little scrap to do the port side of the fuselage. Right, so this is the exciting time to see whether or not there is enough material there. Well, looking at this from above, you would never believe there is just within 2 millimeters enough in that long strip to cut that side of the fuselage out, and that leaves me with just that bit over as a spare. Who would have believed it? Right, so believe it or not, that is it. That's the last bit. That's the only bit of scrap we've got, and that's all I've got left there. And that bit should go along there. So what I've discovered is the trick is to position it, put a couple of bits of tape on in the right place to just help secure it while you tack it on in the right place. And it's taken me building the whole thing to actually learn this and improve my skills, but slowly I'm getting there. The smoother and the more accurately you can lay it out before you try and tack it, the best job you're going to get. And make sure that it's actually going to run all the way across where you want it. But I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to try and tack that bit down in the right place with my huge domestic iron. Little tack there. Move along a bit. Move along a bit, trying to keep the film in just about the right place, which is what it's doing. And then I'll tack a little bit more. Yep, looking quite good. Take off that. I just don't want to iron in. I don't want to give it the possibility of crinkles. So that looks very good to me there. I'm going to put a bit of tape there. Come along a bit, and it's the first time in this process that I've actually felt confident enough. It's the very last piece to go on where I feel confident enough to try and do it on camera, because I must admit it's been a very steep learning curve. So now, yeah, that's still looking okay. Make sure I've got it in the right plane. Now, I saw online you can actually buy a special little iron for doing this stuff with, but obviously using the tip of a domestic iron, I'm actually managing to do a half decent job. As you can see, actually it needs a bit there. Take off the tape there and do that bit. As you can see, one thing I've got to do is put a little tiny strip in there. I didn't really have enough material to do that, but this is actually going pretty well, right down to the nose. And then I'll take off the bit of tape and just do the very last bit and fold it around the end. And it's actually looking pretty tidy. If I'm brave enough, I'm going to risk giving it a very tiny blast with that overpowered hot air gun to make it really tight in between there. But all in all, I'm pretty amazed that I've actually managed to do this after a 12-year gap, and it looks half decent. Right, so that's it, all covered. I'll probably try and make some kind of cowling to cover the motor, make it look a bit prettier. And amazingly enough, that is all that I've got left. So who's a lucky boy then? And it's actually looking quite nice. I think it's going to be a really nice lightweight, possibly indoor flyer, and a lot of fun. Right, so that's 20 minutes long, believe it or not, just with the covering. So next step, in part 3, I'll show you how I fitted the ailerons and the rather serious mistake I made there, installing the elevator and rudder servo and the aileron servo, and another couple of silly mistakes I made there. Been a lot of mistakes actually. Fitting the motor, and the last thing I'm waiting for is my little receiver. So with a bit of luck, that'll also be in part 3. And if we're very lucky, although I doubt it, because at the moment we've got 70-mile-an-hour winds and Storm Dara. But if there's a slim chance, I will endeavour to get some video of the maiden as well. But that's all for now. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Certainly been quite a learning experience for me, and hopefully you will have learned something from my mistakes. If you have enjoyed it, please give the video a like. It helps my algorithms. And please check out some other stuff on my channel. Loads of building and tips and so on, plus lots of little foamy conversions. And while you're down there visiting my channel, if you're not already a subscriber, why not hit subscribe? I'm just about 50 subscribers away from the magic 8,000 subscribers, and you might just tip the balance. But I'll stop waffling on. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully I will catch you all again soon. Bye for now.